Turn to Proverbs 14, if you would, please. Proverbs 14. Let me take a look at two verses. I'm going to look at them out of order, if you will. I'm going to look at verses 11 and 12, but we're going to look at them at 12 and 11. Proverbs. Did I say Psalms? Sorry. Jim's wrong. You remember, God is inerrant, Jim is not. All right? Proverbs. Y'all know what Proverbs are? They're little wisdom observations. They're not promises. They're kind of like I figured out when I was about 12, and I drove a nail trying to tack up an electrical cord on the wall. Yeah, some of you chuckle because you know nail, electrical cord, and I didn't have a brad, so I figured if I drove a nail right down the middle, that would be cool. Well, it was anything but cool. And it made a really cool spark, burned the wall, popped the fuse. I thought it was really neat and exciting. My grandma, not so much. And so I walked away from that with a little proverb. Man, nails and electricity don't match, That's kind of what a proverb is. It's an observation in life. Sometimes we look at the book of Proverbs and we go, oh, well, these are promises God said if I do this and this will happen. No, these are wisdom observations from the man Solomon that he said, you know what, I've kind of lived a number of years and I see these things and I notice these things, and he shares them in order, under the inspiration of God's Spirit, that you and I might benefit from his learning and not have to go through it ourselves. So when we get here into this part of Proverbs, there's a lot of like one verse sayings, these little axioms of truth, if you will. And so when we get to 11 and 12, they're separate but yet they're related. One talks abstractly about truth, and the other one talks about the life of a person who lives or doesn't live by truth. So I want to start with just this general axiom about truth, because I want to talk to you about truth today. I think that our world is want of truth. I think there's a lot of people running around that claim to have truth, and it may be the exact opposite of what somebody else said, and so they go, well, you judge truth for yourself. And so I think we've gotten to this point to where we honestly believe that truth is up for grabs, that truth is relative, that truth depends upon the perspective and the person. It's kind of like when I was a young man and I discovered that in space there is no up. Think about that. Which way is up? Up? Down? Yeah, Scott goes left, right? On Earth. Why is that up? Well, but why do we think that's up? Yeah, because of gravity. You drop something, it goes down. So we go, okay, well, I'm going to go up on the roof. I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to go down to the basement. But that's all defined by gravity. You get in space, there is no gravity. So up is relative. If you're sideways, then up is that way. If you're this way, up is that way. There is no up and down in space. And I remember scratching my head thinking, what? How can up change? Well, okay, in space, all right, that kind of makes sense. But I think that's how we are with truth now. That people go, well, all right, in this circumstance that may be true. In that circumstance I can see where it wouldn't be true. But I really think mostly people scratch their head and go, that doesn't make any sense at all to me. And so I really think people are yearning, they're hungry for truth. And God is a source of truth that has been so readily dismissed in our rush to build our own lives. So in Proverbs chapter 12, he talks about this. Chapter 14, verse 12. He talks about this. He says this, and you've probably heard this verse before. There's a way which seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. Okay? Now that verse stands on its own. There's, stuff that relates to it, but that's his little axiom. That's his little saying of truth. There's a way that seems right to man, but its end is the way of death. So let's break that down a little bit. Let's look at it real quickly. There's a way that seems right unto man. We've gotten pretty good about this notion of relative truth. Wouldn't you agree? Think about it. I say Dallas Cowboys, best football team in the NFL, right? Nobody agrees? Okay, let me pick another team. Vikings? Okay, I'll go with the Vikings. I got a couple of Vikings fans. Now, is that a truth? It all depends on who you ask. And we've accepted truth as that. It all depends on who you ask. And that's what Solomon observes here. There is a way that seems right to a man. And because we have figured that that is right for us, we have defined that as truth. Therefore, we have accepted into our existence that you can have a truth that may be contradictory to my truth. And that a third person can have a truth that may be contradictory to ours. And, we don't want to be judgmental people, but, everybody's got their own truth. Now, the general test of logic is to extend a principle out and see if it works. So, what if my truth is, I want your new big screen TV and it's okay for me to take it? And your truth is, my big screen TV is mine and nobody has the right to take it. Can those two truths exist together? Yeah, just might end up in a fight. I might end up wrestling it out because my truth and your truth contradict. But see, I've defined truth in that context by what seems right to me. Why do we do that? Why are we so quick to relativize truth? I think it's because we don't want to have to surrender to the inevitability of something other than what we want. We're pretty selfish creatures. I want what I want and when I want it. You want to be honest and join me in that club? I mean, I don't think I'm alone in that because, I'm not the only one making credit card payments every month. I'm not the only one that gets mailed them things, and I'm not the only one that sees those commercials that say $14 a month. Because we all want what we want when we want it, and we don't want to have to believe, we don't want to have to embrace, we don't want to have to wake up to the fact that, what? There may be a body of truth out there that I don't like, and I'm going to have to conform my life to it. Because, I want what I want when I want it. Now, I'm not saying that everything is black and white. There are some things that are relative, but there are some things that are not up for debate. There are truths out there that exist independently of what you think and what I think. And we live with them every day. If you climb up on a roof and jump off, regardless of what you think, what's going to happen? You're going to fall. Thank you for saying down. I was hoping somebody, after our discussion, you will not float up. Because of gravity, you will fall down. And you're sitting there and you're hurting at the end of your ride, and you go, you know what? This is rather stupid. I thought I was going to go up. The truth in my mind was that I'm a bird and I can fly. Well, you ran into the hard reality of the truth of physics. Gravity works. Gravity works equally for everyone at all time. Nobody on this earth is immune to gravity. That is the truth, right? Yeah, and then most people can't even spell quantum physics. I mean, the reality is that there are things that exist in life that you and I are restricted by, that are bound to obey. And these things are truths. It's true physically, and it's true morally. But again, we don't want to hear that. We may surrender to physical truth. I may have to realize that if I'm going to jump off of a building, gravity is going to hurt me. I may have to embrace that. But when it comes to moral truths, no, I'm going to be far more reluctant to embrace those. Because if I cross a moral barrier, if I violate a moral truth, There may not be as immediate an impact in my life as if I jumped off of a building, but those impacts are there nonetheless. Even though we may not be as readily willing to agree to it, even though we may surround ourselves, not like we're inclined to do this, right? Surround ourselves with people that will think like we do and talk like we do. What does it matter if you've been married 68 times? You know? What does it matter if you kill a few people? Yeah, I agree with you on that. Anybody, the old saying goes, birds of a feather flock together? Any of y'all surround yourself with people that tell you what you want to hear because you all want to, find comfort in the same illusion, the same misery? Misery does like freedom. We somehow think that we have this right that whatever we want to do is okay. Well, let me ask you a simple question. And you need to be honest with yourself, actually, because I already know the answer to this one. Is it possible for you to know with 100% certainty everything? Is it possible that in what it is that seems right to you, is it possible that in that limited body of truth that you hold, you might be wrong? Is it possible, Brandy, the Vikings are not the best team in the NFL? Oh, she hangs her head. Are we willing to admit that you and I are finite, limited creatures, and though we want what we want when we want it, and though we believe with absolute certainty that that might be true, is there even the most remote of possibilities that I could be, as the Fonz would say, wrong? I think if we want to be honest with ourselves, that just because it seems right to you and I doesn't mean that it is right. Just because I can do it doesn't mean it's something that ought to be done. If you're from the South, I understand that if you can put a motor on it, you can race it. Including everything from cars, motorcycles to grocery carts. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because we think it's right doesn't mean that it is. Are you willing to entertain that notion? It is hubris, it is arrogant for you and I, for us to stand back and to say, no, I've got to be absolutely correct. I thought I made a mistake once, but I was wrong. Let that one soak in on you, right? It's hubris. It's ridiculous for us to think that just because we think that it's right, that it's true, that it is. And that's what Solomon says. He says there's a way that seems right to man, but you know what? You need to wake up to the reality that in the end, it may lead to death. Just because it's right, or in other words, truth, that we consider it that, doesn't mean that it is. Let me tell you what truth is. Truth is A plus B equals C. Okay? You fill in the blanks. 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? 3 plus 2 equals 4, right? That's not truth then. Truth is 2 plus 2 equals 4. And then somebody goes, and it's usually those math geeks that you want to pummel and shove in their locker at school that say, well, if you add in negative numbers, we're not talking negative numbers. Negative numbers are not real numbers. Unless you keep an eye on your checkbook, you don't live in the world of negative numbers. 2 plus 2 equals 4. It always will, right? If I go to a child and I give the child 2 candies and I give the child 2 more candies and I ask the child how many candies they got, they're going to say 7. No. They're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. If I go to another part of the country and I give a man 2 wrenches and 2 wrenches and say how many wrenches do you have, he says I have 4. If I go over into India and I give them 2 cows and ask them how much they have, they say, I have 4 cows. It doesn't matter where you go. It doesn't matter when you ask that. If I go back in time to the Indians and I give them beads, or I go forward in time and I give them something else, 2 plus 2 always equals 4. It's true to all people at all times. It is a truth. Things that do not hold for all people at all time are not true. They're not truths. They're preferences. Are the Cardinals, Gordon, as he heads out to answer the air conditioning guy, he told me before, poor man, says, I'm never going back to church. He's going to call me out again. Are the Cardinals the best team in the NFL? Well, this season they may be. And pigs may fly. Okay? But that's a preference. That's a limited time. It's not a truth. Is Mexican food the best type of food there is? Well, maybe for you. Yeah, I get a lot of affirmation on that. I don't think I've ever said anything that I've gotten a bigger response. Jesus is Lord, amen. Mexican food's good. Woo! Golly. Yeah. There are things that we consider to be truths that are not truths. They may be a positive affirmation. They may for a moment in time be true. But when we talk about truths, when we talk about what is right, we talk about those things that transcend a particular circumstance, that transcend a limited time, that apply to all people at all times. And to have such a truth, you've got to look beyond yourself. Because we already have, I hope you've agreed with me, that I hope you recognize that you're limited and you're finite and you're incapable of seeing all circumstances for all people at all times. And so is your neighbor. And so is somebody else. So is the smartest man, Solomon, that ever lived. He realized, you know what? I've thought some things were right. But in the end, I came to find out, not such a good thing. Contrary to what the federal government would have us believe, you cannot continue to spend recklessly and take out unlimited lines of credit, because eventually, as the old saying goes, you're going to have to pay the piper, right? So even though it seems like you can do, and I love this term, even though it seems like you can live by deficit financing, talk about an oxymoron, deficit financing, eventually the well runs dry. Eventually your creditors call you to pay, and eventually you end up finding corruption and pain and death, because it will not last forever. It is not true. Is it true that you can trust a person to never betray you? No. Because at some point, in some way, a person's liable to betray you. Now, I don't say that to make you suspicious. I'm just saying that that's not a truth. You've got to go outside of human behavior to be able to find a truth, and the only thing outside of human behavior is God. Because God is not one who's corrupted by sin. God is not one that is a man, as the scriptures point out to us, like you and I, prone to the same weaknesses and failures and limitations that you and I are. So while it is true that there's a way that seems right into a man, but in the end leads to death, if God says something is right, it leads to life. It works. It applies. For all people, for all time, no matter where you go, no matter who you are, there are certain truths that every person has to live by. And those truths have been set by God. Now, I would have you to know that those truths are far less than what many of us in church life tend to make them out to be. We like people to believe that, it's a spiritual truth that women ought to wear dresses and guys shouldn't wear makeup. Well, I personally don't think guys ought to wear makeup or dresses, for that matter. But you know what? That's not the sort of truths God's talking about. You know? Does God care that women wear dresses? Well, I'll tell you what. In our world, God cares that women and men are clothed. But, yeah, makeup, clothing, that's a deal to us, not so much to God. There are truths such as the Bible tells us that it is appointed unto man, unto a person once to die, and after this face a judgment. That is a truth, because it applies to all people for all time. And we may not like that, but we need to accept it. There's a truth that Jesus came out and said, listen, you've got to listen to what I say, because the words that I say are true. They are life. And we go, well, I may not like what I have to say, but God himself said that. And that's a truth. It applies to all people at all time. And we've got to entertain it. It doesn't do us any good to ignore the truths of God any more than it does us any good to ignore the truths of physics. You can ignore God all day long, and in the end, you're going to find out that your truth has led to destruction. You treat your spouse badly, you will have a bad relationship. And odds are you will eventually not have your spouse. That's why God says, guys, love your wives. Women, submit to your husbands. It's a truth. It works for all people, for all time. Back up from verse 12 to verse 11 and take a look at this little ditty. It says, the house of the wicked will be destroyed, but the tent of the upright will flourish. You can live your life based on your truth. And you can build a beautiful life based on your truth. Take a look. I mean, there's plenty of folks around that we can point to, and we can say, oh my gosh, they're so-and-so. And they're living by their own rules. They did it my way. But in the end, it led to corruption. In the end, take a look there. The house that they built was destroyed. Let me point out to you a few. Kurt Cobain. Anybody know who Kurt Cobain was? A famous musician. Oh, he had it all, right up to the point where he ate a bullet. How about that woman just last week? She had been on The Bachelor and all of that, and everybody, she had it all, right up to the point she committed suicide. They were living their lives, and I'm not trying to be judgmental against them, because all of us have been there. We build our life on some truth that we think is right, and we build this mighty edifice. Solomon said a house, this well-built structure, but in the end it collapses. You go, hey, now hold on a second. I can point out to you some that, it didn't happen. What about Frank Sinatra? My way. Well, what about Frank Sinatra? Do you know what happened to Frank Sinatra? He died. I wasn't there afterwards. I don't know what God told him. So you don't know how his life ended up either. Because see, when you and I live our lives and we come to the end of our 70, 80, or 100 years, did you hear on the news, the most documented man's 123. But he's going to die someday. And he's going to give an accounting of his life to God. Now, I don't believe that, Pastor. It's true. Whether you believe it or not. Well, how do you know it's true? Because Jesus said it is. Well, how can you trust Jesus? He rose from the dead. Muhammad didn't. Hare Krishna didn't. I'm giving a little more credence to Jesus. He's got some credibility. And he said we're all going to have to answer to God. So even though maybe I make it through this life, building my life on my own truths, I'm going to stand before God on that. And where my truths contradict with his truths, I lose. Even though I may build a house based on my truths, it'll be destroyed. But take a look at what the second verse says. The second part of that verse. It says, but the tent of the upright will flourish. Notice that? The wicked have a house. I got a tent. Well, the point he's making is, it doesn't matter how strong the structure you build. Kind of reminds me of the parable that Jesus shared about those who build their life upon my truth. They're building it on the rock. Now, or you can build it on the sand, and then the waves come, and what happens? Away it goes. I build my little flimsy tent, and people look at it and say, oh, you're an idiot for believing that. But I'm trusting God's truth. It's going to stand. Because see, it doesn't matter. The value is not in the power of my belief. The value is in what it is that I'm believing. It's not a matter of my truth being believed to such a degree that makes it true. Is it truth? Am I putting my trust in what is trustworthy? And with God, the answer is yes. So no matter what, it works. You realize that? You ever thought about that? God works every time. For all people. It doesn't matter where. It doesn't matter when. The truths of God work. And again, please, help me understand. I want you to understand, when I say God's truths, I mean what He has said, not what I've said He says, or what somebody else says He says. It's what He says. It is so sure that repeatedly through the Bible, God throws it down. And He says, try me, test me, prove me, see if I'm not true. Are there moral absolutes that apply to all people at all time, throughout all circumstances? Yes. Nobody's immune to them. Everybody has to answer up. Every person will ultimately give an accounting of their life. And we need to accept that truth to begin with. And then we need to have a little bit of intellectual honesty and ask ourselves, what about the truths that I believe? Are they convenient? Are they really preferences? Am I building my life on something that when the waves and the storms of life that come to everybody come, I'm going to find my house down around my ankles? Or am I building it on the Lord? On His truths, on those things that are absolute and that are bedrock? Am I building it on Him? And when the things of life come, every time He is proven to be correct. I would say to you, and I don't say this as a preacher. I say this just as a fellow traveler in this blue ball we call Earth. If you're going to be honest, you've got to admit you can't always be right. So that means you're going to have to start looking somewhere else for those times when you're not right. Best person, I would say, is to listen to God. I'm going to ask you to bow your heads and wait with me before the Lord. Just quietly consider this. You need an unbiased standard of right and wrong. I need an unbiased standard of right and wrong. We need one that is free of corruption, personal self-interest, one that's able to work in life, not one that depends upon, personal preference. I would say that this is only possible with God and He alone. So let me ask you this. Are you seeking what is true, or are you seeking what you want to be true? Are you basing your life on what is true, or are you basing your life on what you really want to be true? In that same accord, are you willing to pay the price for the truth you trust? you've never put your faith in Jesus, it's a real simple matter of saying, you know what, Lord, I haven't got it all. And I recognize that when I'm given the ball, I can't drop it. So I need to not trust myself. I need to trust you. Forgive me for trusting myself. Help me to trust you. It's as simple as that. If you've never done that, I pray that you would do that. If you don't understand about that, come and talk to me. Say, I'd like to know about, trusting Jesus. If you've given your heart to him, my question is, in trusting him, that means you believe his truths over your own. Are you doing that? Are you building your tent on his truths? If you say, well, I'm not sure, I invite you to come and talk to me. Say, Pastor, I'd really like to get to the bottom of this. I want to know whether I'm building it on his truth or my truth. And I'd be glad to sit down and talk to you about that as well. So, Lord, we thank you for being that objective standard of truth. And Lord, I thank you that, to be honest, you've made it pretty simple. There's not a lot of truths out there that, are right and wrong for all people at all times. Forgive us where we have polluted the water and made so many things, preferential and sectarian. Help us to understand those simple truths that are you, that you exist, and that you reward those who seek you. That's what you've said. I mean, that's the core. You've said you got to believe that I am, and you got to believe that I reward those who seek me. And Lord, where we fail to believe that you are, I ask you to help our unbelief. And where we fail, Father, to seek you, help our unbelief. For Lord, we wish to build our lives on truth. Lord, bless these people. Hold them very close. And all of it we ask because of Jesus Christ, who is the truth, the way, and the life.